My granddaughter, the joy of my life, held up the memory quilt I had spent 5 years lovingly stitching for her, and in front of all her friends and our entire family, she looked at me with a sneer and said, "Grandma, this is a little cheap, don't you think?" Hi everyone, I'm Grandma Helen. My full name is Helen Petrova. I'm 76 years old, and I'm speaking to you from my little sewing room, a place that has brought me both immense joy and, recently, a sorrow so profound it has changed the course of my life. This is a story about a wound that is still fresh. It's a story about the day I realized the family I thought I had, the perfect, loving family everyone saw from the outside, was a beautiful, hollow illusion. My own children don't even know the full story of what happened after that party, after that single, cruel word. Cheap shattered a lifetime of love. They don't know about the secret I had been keeping for their daughter's future, and they certainly don't know what I did with it the very next day. I've been carrying this secret not for years, but for a few, long, silent months. Long enough to know that the silence is a poison, and the only antidote is to finally speak the truth. Before I open up this wound, I hope you'll grant me a small kindness that makes a world of difference. Please, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. To see this community grow, to know that kind souls are listening, it gives an old woman the courage to talk about the day her heart was well and truly broken by the one person she thought she would die for. Thank you. To understand why that one little word, cheap, had the power to demolish a family, you first have to understand what it was that she was holding. It wasn't just a blanket. It was a life. It was my life. It was her father's life. It was a story woven in thread, and its real story began long before my granddaughter, Jessica, was even born. It all started with my Frank, my late husband. He was a carpenter, a man who believed that the best things in life were built by hand, slowly, and with love. He was a quiet man, but his hands were his poetry. Our home, our furniture, the beautiful cradle he built when our daughter Susan was born. It was all crafted by him. He taught me the value of things that money can't buy. "Anyone can buy a table, Helen," he used to say, his hands rough with sawdust but gentle on my cheek. "But not everyone can have a table where their father sanded away his worries and sealed in his hopes." He saw the world in stories, in layers of meaning. He passed away 10 years ago from cancer, and the silence he left behind has been a constant, gentle ache ever since. Our daughter, Susan, Jessica's mother, was different. She was a good daughter, and I love her dearly, but she was never a woman who found poetry in old wood. Susan was always reaching for something shinier, something new. From the time she was a little girl, she was drawn to the glossy pages of magazines, to the lives of people who had more. She married a good man, a lawyer named Robert, and together they built a very comfortable, very successful life in a big, beautiful house in the city. They were good providers for their daughter, Jessica. They gave her everything a child could ever want: the best clothes, the latest gadgets, the most expensive schools. They loved her, I have no doubt, but they taught her to measure love in price tags. From the day Jessica was born, she was my entire world. Susan and Robert were so busy with their careers, so I became Jessica's second home. I was the one who watched her when she was a baby, the one who taught her how to bake her first lopsided cookies in this very kitchen. My house was her playground, her sanctuary. We had a bond, Jessie and I, that was woven from 1,000 shared secrets, 1,000,000 whispered stories. I would sit in my old rocking chair, her small, warm body curled up in my lap, and we would read for hours. When she was scared of the dark, it was my number she'd call. When she had her first crush, it was my ear she whispered her secrets into. For 18 years, I was her constant, her confidante, her unconditional, ever-present source of love. I thought our bond was unbreakable. The idea for the quilt, her graduation gift, came to me about 5 years ago. It was Frank's idea, in a way. He had an old, tattered quilt his own grandmother had made, and he cherished it. "This isn't a blanket," he told me once, tracing the faded patterns. "It's a map of a life." I wanted to give Jessica a map of her own. a map of the love that had brought her into this world. It wasn't something I just decided to make. It was a mission. For 5 years, I gathered the pieces. I was a historian, a curator of our family's love. From an old box in the attic, I took a small square from Frank's favorite flannel shirt, the one he was wearing in the last picture we ever took together. I found a tiny, faded scrap of the pink blanket I had brought my own daughter, Susan, home from the hospital in. From a box of my old keepsakes, I unearthed a piece of the lace from my own wedding veil. Each piece was a ghost, a memory, a story. I called Susan and asked her if she had any of her husband Robert's old baby clothes, or maybe a scrap from her own wedding dress. She thought it was a strange request. "Mom, why on earth would you want that old stuff? It's probably moth-eaten," she'd said, a little confused, a little dismissive. But she sent them. A small square from Robert's christening gown, a tiny piece of the silk from her own wedding dress. And of course, the most important pieces were from Jessica's own life. A swatch from the yellow dress she wore on her first day of kindergarten. A piece of her favorite purple pajamas that she'd worn until they were threadbare. A strip from the ribbon she had won at her first piano recital. For 5 years, I sat in this room and I stitched those memories together. Every single stitch was done by hand. My old arthritic fingers would ache, and sometimes my eyes would blur from the strain. But every stitch was an act of love. I would sit here for hours, the pieces spread out on my lap, and I would remember. I would remember Frank's laugh, the feel of baby Susan's weight in my arms, the sound of Jessica's delighted squeal on her first day of school. I poured my soul into that quilt. It wasn't just cotton and thread. It was my heart, my history, our family story, made tangible. It was, I thought, the most valuable, the most precious thing I could ever possibly give her. Parallel to this, another secret gift was growing. This was Frank's real legacy. Before he got sick, he knew his time was short. He sat me down one evening, his face serious. "Helen," he said, "I'm worried about Jessie's future. Susan and Robert are teaching her to value the wrong things. I want her to have a choice. I want her to be able to follow her dreams, not just a paycheck." That day, he took his entire life savings, the modest but substantial sum he had carefully built over 40 years of hard work, and he put it into a protected educational trust fund. What? In my name, but with Jessica as the sole unchangeable beneficiary, to be accessed only for her college tuition. It was his final, most profound act of love for his granddaughter. "Don't tell Susan and Robert about this," he had warned me. "This is between you, me, and Jessie. This is your gift to give her when the time is right. It's a safety net, built of real love, not fancy thing." For 10 years, I guarded that secret. I was the silent keeper of Jessica's future. After Frank died, I continued to contribute to it myself. I took on a small mending and alterations business from this very sewing room, working late into the night, my old eyes straining. Every penny I earned, every dollar that wasn't needed for my own simple life, went into that fund. I poured my time, my labor, my own small savings into it, on top of what Frank had started. It grew into a sum that was more than enough to send her to any university she dreamed of. It was my secret sacrifice, my silent promise to my husband, and my gift to the girl who was my world. The quilt was the story of her past. The college fund was the key to her future. Together, they represented the entirety of my love, the sum total of my life's devotion. I imagined the day of her graduation party, the moment I would give her these 2 gifts. I pictured her wrapping herself in the quilt, her eyes filling with tears as I told her the stories behind each square. And then, I would hand her the letter revealing the college fund, the final stunning surprise that would set her free to become whoever she wanted to be. That was the dream I held in my heart for 5 long years. A dream of a perfect day, a perfect gift, a perfect, unbreakable bond between a grandmother and the girl she loved more than life itself. I never once imagined, in my wildest, most terrible nightmares, how that day would actually unfold. The day of Jessica's high school graduation party was a perfect, sun-drenched Saturday in June. But as I drove to Susan and Robert's house, a strange, unfamiliar anxiety was fluttering in my stomach, like a trapped bird. I clutched the steering wheel of my old reliable sedan, my knuckles white. Beside me on the passenger seat, carefully wrapped in layers of soft tissue paper and tied with a simple white ribbon, was the quilt, the culmination of 5 years of my life. In my handbag, tucked into a special compartment, was the other gift. A simple, elegant envelope containing the letter from a trust lawyer, the letter that would unlock her future. I told myself I was just being nervous. This was a big day, a momentous occasion. It was normal to feel a little emotional. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The distance between my world and my daughter's world had been growing for years, and it was becoming a chasm that felt increasingly difficult to cross. Their house was, as always, a picture of glossy magazine perfection. It was a huge, modern colonial with a perfectly manicured lawn and a long driveway already filled with expensive, gleaming cars. The party was in the backyard, a space that didn't look like a yard so much as a private resort. A massive white tent was set up on the lawn, and a string quartet was playing softly in the corner. Men in crisp white jackets were serving champagne and tiny, intricate hors d'oeuvres. It was a world away from the simple, heartfelt backyard barbecues Frank and I used to host. I saw Susan immediately. She looked stunning in a sharp, cream-colored linen dress, her hair perfectly coiffed. She was flitting from group to group, a gracious hostess, her laughter bright and practiced. When she saw me, she broke away from a conversation and came over, kissing the air beside my cheek. "Mom, you made it," she said, her smile a little tight. "Just put the gift on the table with the others." She gestured towards a long table draped in white linen, already groaning under the weight of beautifully wrapped boxes from high-end department stores. My simple, tissue-wrapped parcel would look humble, to say the least. "Actually, dear," I said, holding the quilt a little closer, "I was hoping to give this to Jessica myself. It's a bit different." Susan's eyes flickered down to the package, a look of faint, barely concealed impatience on her face. "All right, Mom," she sighed. "Just maybe wait until after the main speeches. Robert is about to say a few words." She gave my arm a quick pat, and then flitted away, drawn back into the orbit of her impressive, important guests. I felt a familiar pain of, not rejection, exactly, but of being gently, politely pushed to the margins. I was her mother, but in this world, in this grand performance of her life, I was a minor character, a slightly out-of-place prop from an earlier, simpler scene. I found a quiet chair on the edge of the patio and sat, a lonely island in a sea of expensive perfume and loud, confident chatter. I watched my granddaughter, Jessica. She was the star of the show, and she was radiant. She was wearing a beautiful, simple white dress, and her long hair fell in waves down her back. She was surrounded by a gaggle of her friends, all of them looking like they'd just stepped out of a fashion catalog. They were laughing and taking selfies, their faces glowing with the easy, unshakable confidence of youth and privilege. A memory, sharp and vivid, pierced through the noise of the party. I saw Jessica at age 7, sitting on the floor of my sewing room, her face a mask of intense concentration, trying to thread a needle with a piece of bright red yarn. Her little tongue was sticking out the corner of her mouth. When she finally did it, she had looked up at me, her eyes shining with such pure, unadulterated triumph. "I did it, Grandma! I did it!" she had shouted, and my heart had felt like it would burst with love for her. Where was that little girl? I looked at the young woman across the lawn, the one who was now expertly posing for another photo, a practiced, perfect smile on her face, and I felt a sudden, chilling sense of dislocation. I knew her. Of course I knew her. But I wondered if she still knew me. Robert finally took to the small, makeshift stage, tapping the glass for attention. He gave a long, eloquent speech about Jessica's many accomplishments, her straight A's, her acceptance into a prestigious university, her promising future. He spoke of her ambition, her drive, her potential. He was proud of her, and he had every right to be. But his speech was a list of achievements, a resume. He spoke about what she did, not who she was. He didn't mention her kindness, or her funny, quirky sense of humor, or the way she used to cry at sad movies. The little girl who loved to press flowers was gone, replaced by a high-achieving young woman with a long list of accolades. After the speeches, a DJ started playing loud, thumping music. The older guests began to drift away, and the party became Jessica's. She and her friends were the center of this new, vibrant, youthful universe. My inner monologue was a quiet, anxious hum. When is the right time? Should I do it now? Maybe I should just leave the gifts on the table. No, Frank wanted this to be special. I promised. My hands felt clammy. The quilt on my lap felt impossibly heavy. Finally, I saw a small lull in the activity. Jessica was standing with two of her closest friends near the gift table, laughing at something on a phone. This was it. It wasn't the perfect, quiet, intimate moment I had dreamed of, but it was the only moment I was going to get. Summoning all my courage, I stood up and walked over to them, my heart thudding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. "Jessica, sweetie," I said, my voice sounding small in the open air. She looked up, her bright smile faltering for a split second as she saw my serious expression. A look of what seemed like social anxiety crossed her face. Her grandmother, in her simple homemade dress, was about to interrupt her cool, sophisticated party. "Oh, hi, Grandma," she said, her voice a little too bright. "Are you having fun?" "I'm having a lovely time," I lied. I wanted to give you your graduation gift, in person." Her friends looked on with a kind of detached, polite curiosity. I felt like I was on stage, under a harsh, unforgiving spotlight. My hands trembled as I began to unwrap the tissue paper. "I've been working on this for a long time, Jessie," I began, my voice thick with an emotion that felt wildly out of place in this slick, impersonal setting. It's a memory quilt. It's a map of our family, a map of all the love that made you." I unfolded it. The quilt was beautiful. Even I, in my nervous state, could see that. The colors, the patterns, the thousands upon thousands of tiny, perfect stitches. It was a masterpiece of love and labor. I held it up for her to see, my old arms aching with the weight of it. I was so proud. I was so full of love. I was about to give her the world. I opened my mouth to start telling her the stories, to point out the little square from her great-grandfather's shirt, the piece from her own baby blanket. I was about to give her the key to the map, but I never got the chance. I held the quilt up, a vibrant tapestry of our family's history, its weight a familiar, comforting presence in my aching arms. The late afternoon sun caught the different textures of the fabric, the soft, worn flannel of Frank's shirt, the smooth silk from my wedding dress, the cheerful printed cotton from Jessica's kindergarten dress. To me, it was a holy object, a sacred text. I looked at Jessica's face, my own face beaming with a love so profound, it felt like a physical light, expecting to see a reflection of that love, that awe, in her eyes. But that's not what I saw. As her eyes scanned the quilt, her bright, practiced party smile faltered. It didn't just fade, it collapsed. Her brow furrowed, not in concentration, but in a kind of cool, critical appraisal. Her lips thinned. She tilted her head, the same way her mother Susan did when she was looking at a piece of furniture she was considering replacing. It was the look of a judge, not a beloved granddaughter. A cold, sick feeling began to unspool in the pit of my stomach. This was not the reaction I had dreamed of for 5 years. Her friends, who had been watching with polite curiosity, exchanged a quick, almost imperceptible glance. One of them, a tall girl with severely straight hair, let out a tiny, stifled sound, a cough that sounded suspiciously like a snort of derision. Jessica's eyes flickered towards her friend, and in that split-second glance, I saw it all. I saw the shame. She was ashamed. Of the quilt. Of the story. Of me. My own smile began to feel stiff and brittle on my face. My arms, holding the heavy quilt, suddenly felt weak, foolish. The joyous, momentous occasion I had rehearsed in my mind 1,000 times, was curdling, turning sour right before my eyes. "It's a blanket," Jessica finally said, the words falling flat and dead in the space between us. There was no wonder in her voice, no delight, just a kind of flat, clinical observation. "It's a memory quilt, sweetie," I repeated, my voice sounding desperate, pleading. "Look, see this square here?" I pointed with a trembling finger. "This is from your Grandpa Frank's favorite shirt, and this one, this little piece of lace, this is from my wedding veil." I was trying to give her the key, to unlock the magic, to make her see. But she wasn't looking at the stories. She was only seeing the surface. And the surface, in her world, was all that mattered. She reached out and took a corner of the quilt between her perfectly manicured thumb and forefinger. She rubbed the fabric, the old, soft, lovingly worn flannel, as if it were a strange, slightly distasteful substance. Her friend, the one who had snorted, spoke up. Her voice was dripping with a kind of bored vocal fry. "Oh my God, Jess," she said, not even looking at me. "Your grandmama did that? That's like, so, rustic." The word rustic was delivered as if it were an insult, a synonym for backward or uncivilized. Jessica's face flushed a deep, mortified crimson. She dropped the corner of the quilt as if it were on fire. She looked from her friend's smirking face to my hopeful, pleading one. And in that moment, she made a choice. She chose her friend. She chose the cool, glossy world of her future over the warm, heartfelt world of her past. She chose to be embarrassed rather than to be loved. She looked at me, her beautiful, familiar face contorted into an expression I had never seen before. It was a mask of cold, teenage disdain, an expression of profound social agony. And then she said the words that would sever the cord of our love as cleanly as a pair of sharp new scissors. "Grandma," she said, her voice loud enough for her friends and several other nearby guests to hear clearly. "I mean, thank you. It's a nice thought, but a gift like this, for graduation, it's a little cheap, don't you think?" "No. Cheap, and the word hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was as if she had slapped me across the face. Cheap, 5 years of my life, a piece of my husband's soul, a swatch of my daughter's infancy, a remnant of my own wedding day, the ribbon from her first recital, thousands of hours of my failing eyesight and my aching fingers, the entire, immeasurable, priceless history of our family's love. All of it in her world, in her value system, added it up to a single damning word: cheap. The air rushed out of my lungs. The sounds of the party, the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, all faded into a dull, roaring buzz in my ears. The only thing I could see was my granddaughter's face, her beautiful, cruel face, looking at me as if I were a piece of trash she had just found on the bottom of her expensive shoe. My inner monologue, which had been a stream of hopeful, loving words, simply stopped. It was replaced by a vast, silent, white emptiness. The shock was so absolute, so profound, that it went beyond pain. It was a kind of spiritual death. The Helen who had walked over to that table, full of love and hope, was gone. Annihilated. I looked down at the quilt, still held in my hands. It no longer looked beautiful. It looked pathetic. A collection of old, faded rags. A monument to my own foolishness. I had tried to give a map to a girl who didn't believe in history. I had tried to give a heart to a girl who only valued things that came with a receipt. And in that vast, silent, empty space inside me, something new began to form. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger. It was a cold, quiet, and utterly unshakable resolve. She had just given me a gift, too. She had given me the gift of clarity. She had shown me, with a brutality that was almost merciful in its honesty, exactly who she was. She was not the little girl who loved to press flowers. She was her parents' daughter. A girl who measured the world in dollars and cents. A girl who saw a lifetime of love and valued it as cheap. And the other gift? The secret one? The college fund? The safety net woven from her grandfather's hard work and my own quiet sacrifice. The key to her future, her freedom, her dreams. In that instant, I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I could not give it to her. To give her that money now would be to validate her cruelty. It would be to agree with her assessment. It would be to say, "You are right, my love was cheap. Here is something expensive to make up for it." I would not do that. I would not betray my Frank's memory. I would not betray myself. A strange, serene calm descended upon me. The roaring in my ears stopped. I looked up and met my granddaughter's mortified, impatient gaze, and I smiled. It wasn't a warm, loving, grandmotherly smile. It was a small, tight, secret smile that didn't reach my eyes. "You know what, Jessica?" I said, and my voice was perfectly even, perfectly calm. "You are absolutely right." It was a cheap gesture. A silly, sentimental thought from a silly, sentimental old woman. "Please forgive me." And then, very slowly, very deliberately, I began to fold the quilt. I folded it with the same care with which I had stitched it. I folded my husband's shirt. I folded my wedding veil. I folded my daughter's baby blanket. I folded my granddaughter's childhood. I folded it all up into a neat, compact square. I held the folded quilt in my hands. It was still heavy, but it was no longer a gift. It was just a blanket. "I'll take this out of your way," I said, my voice still light, still smiling. I tucked the folded quilt under my arm. "You have a wonderful party, sweetie. You deserve it. You've worked so hard." And with that, I turned around. I did not look at her friends' shocked, confused faces. I did not look for my daughter in the crowd. I simply walked away. I walked across the perfect green lawn, past the string quartet, past the men in their white jackets. My back was straight. My head was held high. Under my arm, I carried the rejected story of our family. And in my handbag, nestled safely in its elegant envelope, I carried the future. Our future. A future that I, and I alone, now control. And I knew, with every step I took, that it was a future she was never, ever going to see. My walk away from that party was the longest and quietest walk of my life. Each step I took across that perfectly manicured lawn was a step away from the woman I had been for 76 years. The Helen who believed in the unconditional love of family. The Helen who poured her soul into acts of service. The Helen who thought a handmade gift was the ultimate expression of devotion. That woman was left behind, a ghost among the champagne flutes and the string quartet. The woman walking towards the street was someone new, someone colder, someone whose heart was not broken, but had been flash frozen into a solid, unbreakable block of ice. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't look for my daughter, Susan. I knew, with a mother's instinct, that finding her would be useless. She would have offered a flustered, embarrassed apology for her daughter's behavior, all while shooting me a look that said, "Why did you have to make things so awkward?" She would have tried to smooth things over, to manage the social fallout, not to heal the wound. She was a part of that world, the world where appearances were more important than feelings. In a way, she had been teaching Jessica to be this girl her entire life. This was not a sudden aberration. It was the logical conclusion of her upbringing. I reached my car, my old, humble sedan, looking utterly out of place among the gleaming luxury vehicles. I got in, placed the folded quilt on the passenger seat beside me, and started the engine. As I pulled away from the curb, I glanced in my rearview mirror. I could see the party, the big white tent, the clusters of laughing, beautiful young people. And for a fleeting second, I saw Jessica. She was back with her friends, laughing now, gesturing with her hands. She had already moved on. The entire, devastating encounter had been nothing more to her than a brief, embarrassing interruption in her perfect day. For me, it was the end of the world. The drive home was a blur. I was on autopilot, my mind a strange, silent, and incredibly busy place. The initial, shocking pain had subsided, replaced by an ice-cold, methodical clarity. I wasn't thinking about the past anymore. I wasn't grieving for the bond I had lost. I was thinking about the future. Specifically, I was thinking about the envelope in my handbag, the college fund, Frank's legacy, my sacrifice, the key to her future. The weight of it, the responsibility of it, was immense. Frank's dying wish had been for Jessica to have a choice, to be free. But what did freedom mean to a girl who valued a quilt made of her family's history as cheap? What dream would she follow? A dream of a bigger house? A faster car? A more exclusive country club? To give her that money now felt like a betrayal of everything my Frank had stood for. He had built that fund from the calluses on his hands, from a lifetime of honest labor. He believed in the value of things that were real, that were earned, that had soul. To hand that legacy over to a girl who had just sneered at the very soul of her family felt obscene. I got home to my small, quiet, empty house. The silence, which had often felt lonely, now felt like a relief. It was a sanctuary. I walked into my sewing room, the room where I had spent countless hours pouring my love into that quilt. I looked at the spools of thread, the scraps of fabric, the old rocking chair where Jessica had sat on my lap as a child. I felt a pang of grief so sharp it almost took my breath away. But it passed, like a cold wind. I laid the quilt out on my bed. I smoothed out the wrinkles. I looked at it, really looked at it, under the soft light of my own lamp, away from the harsh judgment of the afternoon sun and the scornful eyes of teenagers. It was beautiful. It was a masterpiece. It was a map of a life well lived, of a love that had been real and true. It wasn't cheap. It was priceless. She hadn't rejected a blanket. She had rejected her own history. She had rejected her own heart. And in that moment, I knew. The question of what to do with the college fund was no longer a question. The answer was as clear and hard as a diamond. My Frank had wanted to give her a choice. Her choice, the one she had just made so publicly, was to value money over love. So be it. The final straw wasn't her words. It was the silence that followed. In the days after the party, my phone did not ring. Susan did not call to apologize or to check on me. Jessica certainly didn't call. In their world, the incident had been smoothed over, forgotten, erased. I, the source of the awkwardness, had been erased along with it. Their silence was the final confirmation. They had made their choice. Now, I would make mine. My awakening was not a moment of tearful collapse or dramatic epiphany. It was a quiet, cold dawn. It happened the Monday morning after the party. I woke up, and the grief was gone. The hurt was gone. The love, that vast, unconditional, all-consuming love I had felt for my granddaughter, was also gone. In its place was a calm, serene, and utterly immovable resolve. The queen on the chessboard had been taken, and a new, far more powerful piece had just been put in her place. My fight back was not a war. It was a quiet, simple, and deeply satisfying business transaction. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I made myself a pot of tea, sat down at my small kitchen table, and I opened the envelope from the trust lawyer. I read the documents that Frank and I had signed all those years ago. I read them with new eyes, not the eyes of a sentimental wife, but the eyes of a pragmatic businesswoman. The trust was, as Frank had promised, ironclad. I was the sole trustee. The funds could only be dispersed for Jessica's educational expenses, but the dispersal was entirely at my discretion. My discretion. The two most beautiful words in the English language. My first act was a phone call. Not to Susan, not to Jessica, but to the law firm that managed the trust. I spoke to a very polite, very professional young man. "Hello," I said, my voice calm and clear. "My name is Helen Petrova. I am the trustee for the Jessica Evans Educational Trust." "Yes, Mrs. Petrova. How can I help you today?" "I am invoking my right as trustee to dissolve the trust, effective immediately, I said. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Dissolve the trust, Mrs. Petrova. But the beneficiary has just graduated. Are you sure? The funds are substantial. Oh, I'm quite sure, I said, a small, cold smile playing on my lips. Circumstances have changed. The beneficiary has chosen a different path. Please liquidate all the assets and transfer the full amount, after taxes, into a new personal account under my name only. Nanny. There was more sputtering, more talk of legal requirements, of forms that needed to be signed. I listened patiently. Please send all the necessary paperwork to my address via courier, I said. I will sign it and send it back tomorrow. And that was that. With a single 10-minute phone call, a future was erased. A safety net was folded up and put away. A key was taken out of a lock, forever. But I wasn't finished. Dissolving the fund was an act of prevention. My next act was one of reallocation. My Frank had taught me about the value of things that are built by hand. He had taught me that real worth comes from soul, from passion, from dedication. Jessica had taught me that she did not share those values. But I knew someone who did. My best friend Martha's grandson, a wonderful, bright, and kind boy named Leo, was a brilliant artist. He painted, he sculpted, he created beautiful things with his hands, but he came from a family with very little money. His dream was to go to the state's most prestigious art college, but he knew it was impossible. He was planning to get a job at the local hardware store to help his parents pay the bills. He was a boy who understood the value of a dream. He was a boy my Frank would have loved. My second phone call was to Martha. Martha, I said, I have a strange question for you. Do you know how much the tuition is for all 4 years at the art college Leo dreams of going to? Martha was confused, but she told me. She knew the number by heart, a number that had been a source of quiet family heartache for years. Thank you, I said. That's all I need to know for now. The next day, after the legal documents arrived and I had signed them, I went to my bank. I set up a new anonymous trust, an educational scholarship. The beneficiary was Leo. The amount was the exact, full tuition for all 4 years of his dream school, plus living expenses. It was named the Franklin Petrova Scholarship for Young Artisans. The rest of the money, the very substantial remainder of Frank's legacy and my own life savings, I put into an account for myself. Not for a fancy new life, but for security, for independence, for the quiet, profound peace of knowing that I would never have to depend on anyone ever again. The final act was the most satisfying of all. It was the act of returning a gift. About a week later, I received a package in the mail. It was a small, elegant box. Inside was Jessica's formal, engraved graduation announcement and a small, professionally printed card. On the card was a link to her university's tuition and gift registry. It was a polite, modern, and utterly soulless way of asking for money. I looked at it, and I smiled. I took out a single piece of my own, simple stationery. I wrote a short, polite note. Dearest Jessica, thank you so much for the lovely announcement. College is a wonderful and expensive adventure. I know you will do great things. As for a gift, I have decided to honor your own stated values. You made it very clear at your party that you prefer gifts that are not cheap. My own humble, handmade offerings are clearly not up to your standard, and I wouldn't dream of insulting your sophisticated tastes a second time. Therefore, my graduation gift to you is the gift of your own independence. I have every confidence that a young woman of your ambition and talent will have no trouble at all, securing the loans and scholarships necessary to fund the future you have chosen. You wish you all the best. Sincerely, Helen Petrova. Enjoy. I didn't sign it, Grandma. I didn't sign it with love. I signed it with the cold, formal finality of a business transaction being closed. I put my note in an envelope. I did not include a check. And then I took the folded memory quilt. I wrapped it carefully in a new box. And I mailed it along with my note to Leo. I included a small card. Every artist needs a map of where they came from. I hear you're going to art school. Congratulations. Your first commission is already paid for. A friend. I had taken back the college fund. I had reallocated a future. And I had sent the story, the priceless, cheap story, to someone who would know what it was truly worth. I had not been erased. I had simply and quietly rewritten the ending. The phone call came about 2 weeks later. It was Susan. Her voice was a register I had never heard before, a high-pitched, frantic screech of disbelief and rage. "Mother, what have you done? What in God's name have you done? Jessica's tuition is due, and we went to the trust, and they said you dissolved it. They said the money is gone. Is this a joke? Where's my daughter's college fund?" I let her scream. I listened to the torrent of accusations, of insults, of sheer panicked fury. I waited until she had exhausted herself, until her voice was a raw, hoarse gasp. Then I spoke, and my voice was as calm and serene as a frozen lake. "There is no college fund, Susan," I said. "That was a private trust set up by Frank and me, a gift to be given at my discretion, and I have decided not to give it." "Not give it? It was her right," she shrieked. "It was her grandfather's dream for her," I corrected, my voice still quiet. "A dream that she could be a person who valued things of the heart. But she made it very clear at her party what she truly values. She values things that are not cheap. So I have honored her wishes. I have not given her a cheap gift. In fact, I have given her no gift at all." There was a stunned, sputtering silence on the other end. "But her future, her education, what is she supposed to do now?" And is she will? I imagine a girl with her ambition and drive will have no trouble securing student loans," I said, echoing the words from my own letter. "It will be a valuable lesson for her in the true cost of things, perhaps the first one she has ever had." "You are a cruel, bitter old woman," she finally sobbed, all the rage dissolving into pathetic, self-pitying tears. "How could you do this to your own granddaughter? You should ask your daughter how she could do what she did to her own grandmother," I said softly. And then I did something I have never done before in my life. I hung up on my own child. The consequences were absolute. Jessica, faced with the prospect of taking on hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt, did not go to her prestigious, out-of-state university. She ended up at the local community college, a fine school, but a devastating social fall for a girl who had been raised to believe she was destined for the Ivy League. She had to get a part-time job. She learned the value of $1, the hard way. Susan and Robert were furious, of course. They tried to fight it, but their lawyers told them what I already knew. They had no legal leg to stand on. The trust was mine to control. In their attempt to shame me, they told the rest of the family their version of the story, that their poor, aging mother had gone senile and selfishly stolen her granddaughter's future. But then Martha's grandson, Leo, received his scholarship, and he and his grateful family told everyone the story of the anonymous gift and of the beautiful, priceless memory quilt that had arrived with it. And people, people are not as stupid as Susan and Robert think they are. They can put 2 and 2 together. The story got out. The true story. And me. I found a new life. The money that I kept for myself gave me a freedom I never knew I was missing. But the greatest piece came from something else. It came from repurposing Frank's legacy. The Franklin Petrova Scholarship for Young Artisans is now a permanent foundation. Every year, we give a full scholarship to a talented, deserving young student who wants to build beautiful things with their hands: a carpenter, a quilter, a painter, a potter. I sit on the board. I read their applications. I see the passion in their eyes. And every time we give a scholarship, I feel my Frank smiling. The greatest lesson I learned was that value is a choice. We choose what we cherish. For years, I had cherished the idea of my perfect, loving granddaughter. But that was a story I was telling myself. The day of the party, She showed me who she really was, and she gave me a choice: to accept her valuation of me, or to finally, for the first time in my life, assert my own. So now, I talk to you. To anyone out there who has ever poured your heart and soul into a gift, only to have it be dismissed or misunderstood. Do not ever let someone else's price tag define the value of your love. Your love, your time, your soul, they are not cheap. They are the only things in this world that are truly priceless. And they should only be given to those who have the grace to understand that. Thank you for letting me share my story with you all today. It has been a painful one, but a liberating one as well. If you have a story about a gift, one given or received, that held a special meaning, please share it in the comments below. I would love to read them. And please, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world. Love you all. This is Grandma Helen, and I'll see you in the next story.